It's preparing. Okay, now it's recording. All right. Let's make sure we're in a spot here for recording. So when we start, there's a few things we need. We absolutely need a big bucket like this. Have to have this big bucket. Do not come over with one of those little blue cups and feel that you are prepared, because you will not be. Okay, so you need to have a big bucket. You need to have a big sponge, a small sponge. Okay, you need a wire. One of these wooden ribs is fantastic. And then a pin tool. Those are all the things you need to start with. You need to not be wearing your finest white sweater. I do have this really fashionable shirt that you are welcome to borrow if you have something on that you're concerned about. And definitely an apron, okay? We're going to talk a little bit about how much clay we're going to be using for this. I have a little scale here. This is way too big. This is like 2.5 pounds. So I'm going to go a little bit less. I just don't want to make anything too huge. And I'm going to take some of the material off for this. And you can start with pugged clay. Put that off to the side. If you have clay from a box, which we will have soon, because we're going to eventually run out of our pugged clay, the clay from the box you'll have to cut in such a way that you can get a nice egg shape. All right, so we'll have to be careful with that. Again, we can't fold anything for fear of having air pockets. So you notice I'm just bringing those edges down, getting it kind of roundish. And we have this surface and it's dry. It has to be dry to start because you want to create adhesion with the clay to the metal. All right. And full disclosure, I do have little plates that can also sit on this that you can turn on or throw on the plate and then just remove the plate. So there's a possibility of doing that if you're going to be doing multiples, or if you want to do it and then cut it off later and let it dry a little bit. So there's lots of ways of tackling this, all right? So I've got it kind of in an egg shape, and I say an egg because I'm going to punk it right down in the center. You notice there's rings right through here, okay? So that tells you what the center is, okay? And when I punk it down, I kind of want to smack it down just a little bit, right? And then I'm going to smush it and try to get it as centered as I can. And you want pretty soft clay. Let me see, I'll do a little video of that so you can kind of see. There. Okay, and then we're going to start. The first thing that we're going to do is we have to make sure that the pedal is right here, that it's on and going in the right direction. So I want to go in counterclockwise, and it is, okay? It can go both directions, so if you find that it's not going counterclockwise, there's a switch over on the side. Just flip it in the other direction. And then there's an on button that for this particular one is orange, but some of them are green, so it depends on which one you're on, okay? My first action is going to be pushing down with my hands, not trying to center it. We will try to center it, and that'll be the first thing that you try to do when you try to do it on your own, okay? So I want my hands to be wet, and I'm not doing anything fancy other than just kind of pushing straight down. Once I get a good speed, like this is a good speed, I take my hand or my foot off of the pedal. Actually, that's a little fast. Yeah, that's a little better. And I'm just pushing down. And you can see, like, if you see my hands, how they're wiggling, it's not centered, okay? It's not centered yet. It will be, but it's wiggling right now. Okay, now I feel like it's secure on there, so when I start pushing on this thing, it's not going to go flying off. That's always exciting when that happens too. So, again, you need your hands to be wet, but you don't need so much water that it's like spraying around the classroom. All right, I have a lot of students who do this, and that's how they start. 2 reasons. A, it makes a mess, and that's a lot for you to clean up. But B, you're ending up putting so much moisture on the clay that it becomes just like wiggly on there, and then it's difficult to work with. So you want just enough so that your hands slide easily, right? But you don't want so much that it's like, again, spraying off all over the place. We do have, the tray that goes around, and I'll show you how to wash that at the end. But what you'll notice is on your hands you get kind of like a slip, essentially. That to me is the best thing because it's lubricating your hands in the sense that you'll slide easily on the clay, but it's not like soaking wet. So when I wet my hands, I usually just get a little bit of water, rub that clay around, and that's what I use. Now, the first thing we're going to do is center it. So think of your body as a clock facing forward. Where I'm looking is 12 o'clock, right? This is 12 o'clock. So 7 o'clock is over here, right? And 2 o'clock is over here. You're going to take your left hand, and I don't know that this really matters lefty to righty, but it might. So if you want to go the other direction, if you're left-handed, that's totally cool. And then it would be 5 o'clock to like 10 o'clock, right? But 7 to 2, I'm going to take the heel of my hand right here, and I'm going to push, and what I want to do is push in to push down the parts that are sticking out, the high points. Does that make sense the way I'm saying that, right? So you're not pushing so that you push it right off, obviously, that we wouldn't want. But you're pushing it in, you're going to feel the parts that are coming out at you. Those are the high points, and you're trying to settle those down. It's a great way to think of it, okay? So that's what I'm doing. I have to absolutely put my elbow into my hip, and my hip does the work. Your body will do the work far better than your hands or your arms, even if you're super strong, right? Your hands will want to go like this. Your body is a constant. It's harder to push me off the seat than it would be to hold my hands steady. Does that make sense? Okay. So I'm going to go like that. All right, centered. Now, to ensure that the clay is what it ought to be, we do what's called coning. So I'm bringing this down just a little bit, so it's now kind of flat, right? And then I'm going to bring it back up, and it kind of just gets all of the not cells, but the grain, we'll say. That's a better word. The grain of the clay. So that it's really truly centered, not just centered kind of on the outside. All right, so I'm going to bring it up in a cone. I have a little wobble now, see? Wobble, wobble, wobble. Less of a wobble, and then I'll bring it down. You do that a few times. A, it's good practice, and B, it really makes sure that you're centered. Now, this is a feel thing, so you're going to watch me do this, and you're like, oh, Miss Zenas did it, and it was so easy. And honestly, it's one of those things that I'm kind of making it into a cup shape, so I'm getting there. It's one of those things that it's a feel thing, so you have to get used to it. So the learning will happen not only from listening to what I say, but more so doing it. You will learn more by trying this than anything that I have to say, okay? I'm getting you started, but the learning process happens when you're physically understanding and feeling what I'm feeling as I do this. That's super important, right? So don't get discouraged when you're first starting it. So once I get it, I do the coning and I get it kind of roughly where I want. I just want to clear this out so you can see how big the foot is just a little bit. I want to get it in just kind of almost like a, I don't know, like a tall hockey puck. What food relates to this? I don't know, maybe a flan. So that the bottom foot is roughly what I want for the foot of whatever it is I'm making. Mug, bowl, fill in the blank, right? So I want this point right here to be what I want. All right? And then I'm going to start going down from the center. Now I'm doing it double thumbs. Some people do it like this. I learned that way, but I don't like it, so I don't do that. I like double thumbs and kind of supporting the outside with my hands. That's what I like. But you can certainly try both ways if you want. It's up to you. I'm kind of just going straight down. I'm not trying to pull out in this direction so that it's coming up. I'm just going straight down. And I want to go down to about 1/2 inch from the bottom. Now you're like, well, how do you know what that is? So once I do that, I stop it. And then I take the pin tool, that's why we need the pin tool, and I poke it in, so that it's looking like that. And it's okay, that hole's going to fill in, so don't sweat it. This is not just a learning thing. And then I take my finger right down to that hole, and I look at it, and I'll put it on the camera like that. Yes, it's about a half inch, maybe a tiny bit more, maybe 5/8, right? So, now I know that my bottom is where I want it to be. I have to get that speed again. I like that speed. Okay. And I'm going to go in. I think I have an air bubble in this. Let me just double check. I'm feeling an air bubble on the outside. Yep, right there. So if you find an air bubble in it, there's two things you can do. You can try to pinhole it, put the pin in it and open it up and see if you can get it out that way. Your first piece is probably not going to be a keeper, just saying. Don't get too attached. The first one is usually like figuring out centering and see if you can make it do something, but don't worry about it if you don't. It's not a big deal. All right, so I have an air bubble. I'm not going to worry about it too much. Okay, that's good. So I have this going, and now I'm going to go essentially at about 4 or 5 o'clock. I am going to go out and then up. Now, this is where you do have to listen and then try to put it in practice. If I take my 2 knuckles as I'm pulling it up and keep them even with each other, like this, then theoretically it should go straight up, okay? Like a vase or a mug or something like that. If I have my inside hand above my outside hand, then it'll go out because it'll be pulling this way. And vice versa, if I have my outside hand above my inside hand, where the pressure is happening, it should go in. If you remember that, that'll help, okay? That's a feel thing, so easier said than done, right? But that's what we're going to try to do. So I'm just coming out, and my pressure is right, I'm using my fingers right here, and then just a little bit of the outside of my hand. And I'm just going out first, just to kind of establish the bottom. And I'm thinning the outside so I don't make it too thin right here and then heavy here. So I'm trying to keep it somewhat even. That's important. Okay. And then next step might be, if you want, a small sea sponge. Okay, you can squeeze it out, one of these. I like this on the outside. I feel like I just have more control with it. So, I'm going to come up like so. And then if you start to feel any pull on your hands, just wet the hands, because that's what will misshape this. Okay, is that. So I'm just coming up. The other bowl I made was kind of opened up. So this one I'm going to try to have it a little more closed. And you do want it to be even all the way. It's harder to tell when you have a sponge. So you may have to take a point where you're feeling inside to outside to make sure, oh yeah, the thickness is about the same. This is just like your pinch pot. You want, no more than a ½ inch if you can help it, right? And then sometimes it's getting slightly wobbly, but not terrible. You can kind of go like this to write it. The farther out you go, the more that you might have a little slight wobble or nuance, and that's okay. That's not a big deal. So this isn't bad. I can live with it. You can see it really actually doesn't take that long to do something. And potters that do this constantly, they whip it out like boop, boop, boop. And you're like, oh, wow, you're done. Okay. So one of the things you do want to do is you want to compress the bottom. This is a step that nobody should skip. Why not, Jackson? Tell me why. I know you know why. Yeah. Yes. And you might get a crack as it's drying. So as you're putting all this water in it, All those things that Jackson said, very true. Jackson's been doing some throwing on the wheel in Clay Club. All of those things are very true. But compressing the bottom, so I put the sponge in. It might be hard to see what I'm doing on the inside on the video. You put the sponge in and you go from the outside to the inside, to the outside, to the inside, and you kind of just rub the bottom, essentially. That compresses the clay, and all of that water gets soaked up that was sitting there. It should never sit there. If it sits there, what happens is it will create a crack, and then you'll have this gorgeous bowl or mug or whatever it is, and then it'll crack, and you'll be super bummed, and then it'll be a planter, you know? So you don't want that. So you want to compress the bottom, super important. And then you can take the sponge if you want and kind of doctor up the inside, make sure it like looks like the surface that you want. You're like, okay, that looks good, I like that. And then you can also do the same on the outside. That's totally cool. The last thing that you can do is do the top edge. I think that's an important thing. So with the top edge, we have a lot of slip up there, so I want to get the slip off, so that's not part of what is the edge. Okay? And so first I'm going to just get the extra slip off. Because you've essentially dragged it from the bottom all the way to the top, right? So there's extra loose clay up there, so we want to get rid of that. And you could, and I'll stop it so you can see it, you can keep it kind of roundy like that. That's totally cool. You could make kind of a flat edge. That's my fave, but, you know, it's all personal preference. You could have it angled out, but you should have something deliberately done. If you have an uneven top, you can kind of cut it, and I have a couple of tools for that. But this one's not uneven, so I'm not going to cut it. So I do this little thing where I get my fingers wet, and then I do this. I like that edge, but I think my edge is a little thick, so I'm just going to bring it up a tiny bit more. And then I'm going to do that again. I'm going to do it again, just till I get what I want. This one's probably not going to make it, because I think it's got an air bubble in it, so... But it'll be a good sample. And I think I want to do it with the sponge because I like the way that looks. And I also think it makes it nice for when I'm trying to show you how to do the bottom later on. Ah, there. That's good. Boop. There. Now the last thing I'm going to do while it's spinning is I'm going to start to scrape the bottom. So the first thing I want to do is take that little sponge and just go in to the center and try to get some of this excess stuff off. Now you notice I do have, around the edge I have some splatter, but not like boatloads, right? A little bit. My pants have kind of survived it, which is good. Okay? And we have that. And then I'm going to take this tool and just scrape a little. You want to make sure you're doing it at about 4 o'clock in this direction so that you don't catch, right? And then I'm going to pull a little bit, put that in my bucket. Everything goes in the bucket. And so there's a few schools of thought on this, and I'm going to show you both. So Miss Kay, the way she throws on the wheel, she's very good at this. Far better than me. She really is. She's fantastic at it. And the way she does it is she does an undercut like you just saw me do with a tool. And she makes it nice and neat, and then cuts it off and says it's done. And it looks great. There's another way that I can show you guys how to do it, and this will be the second round of demos. That you can flip it over and use a trim tool and create like a little foot on the bottom. And a lot of potters like to do that as well. So it will be your preference. You will have the choice. Okay? So once I'm done with this, I say, okay, fantastic. I have my cereal bowl. Now I want to cut it off, right? So in order to cut it off, I need a wire, and I need a board, and a piece of plastic, and a friend. Jackson, you want to be my friend? Right? So just like this, I'm going to have you hold this. We'll scooch this out of the way. I'm going to take that out of the way. Just put it out the way. And then you're going to hold that right there. Okay, so I have a place to go with this. You need to be prepared. The first thing we're going to do, we do have to turn it back on again, actually. Do you want to do that? little faster. A little more. Not too much.
I can do it with my hands.
Okay, so you want it spinning, and you're going to cut it off with the wire while it's spinning. I promise it will not go. That would be really exciting, actually, if it did, but it's not going to do that. So what you're going to do is you have to do this decisively. So do it like you mean it. Who's the boss of the clay? You. That's right. You're the boss. So you're the boss now. So what you want to do is pull this tight, and you see how I have it wrapped a bit, and my thumb's down right on this plate, and it's spinning. And you do it like, okay, pull it tight, and you're like, okay, done. It's actually not really that dramatic. It feels like you're like, oh, what am I doing? But it's not. It's like totally fine. It's not a big deal. And then you take your little sponge, and you put a little water, and you make a little puddle. Okay. And then Jackson's ready. So I take that and I drag that water right through. And then, hopefully, it makes it right over to the pot. Oh, almost there. Oh, that worked out so good. It never works out that good.
I was going to say, she makes it look easy.
It's usually, you usually have to push it a little bit with your hands. But again, so this is on the video. Once you have the plastic on, you can drag the plastic over, like so. And then this is very soft and squishy. So once it's on here, like this, you just want to drape the plastic over it and let it dry and stiffen until you want to either do the bottom or whatever it is that you want to do with it. Like if I wanted to take this, and a fun idea is to like put stamps on the outside or something to give it some texture or something unique. You could totally do that, but you'd wait until it's just a little bit stiffer. Okay? So that is a finished thing. But the demo's not over. The exciting demo is not over. The last part, one of the most important parts of the demo, is cleanup. And I need you guys to focus on this because I'll get grumpy otherwise. So this is where our big sponge comes into play. You can do most of the cleanup right here with your big bucket of water. It will make everything that you do, not good when your hands are really dirty, so much easier. And then I'm going to get like my tray, mostly cleaned of clay. Okay. I'm going to take all the extra clay off of this. Okay, and I'm going to sponge this. And most of this will come off so easily, and it's really not, it should not be too difficult, but for some reason sometimes it is. And then you're going to take this, take any excess. Even if your clay water, has a lot of clay in it, you can still get most of the big stuff off. Put that aside, and I will rinse those in the sink later. I go like this. I make sure to get the sides, because you don't want a lot of dried clay. I get underneath. I get all my tools. Okay. I don't usually have a scale right here, but you're going to wipe all of this up. Bring your tools over and finish those off in the sink. Now, really important with this bucket. So we can see this bucket, right? I'll put it right up here so we can see it. There's a lot of clay on this. A lot of clay on my hands. I can definitely get most of this off using the water in here. But the water in here should not go in our scrap bucket. The reason being is there's some metal that comes off of the plate right here. And it goes into, and it'll make it almost, you'll see it at the bottom when you clean off the bucket, like a little bit of a gray slurry. So I don't want that in our recycled clay. But I also don't want it down my sink, right? Clay in my sink makes clogged pipes, then we have no sinks. So it becomes very problematic very quick. So we need to be very careful. So when you're doing this, you're going to go through and you're going to make sure that any clay that you scraped on the sides is kind of washed down. You're going to let it settle. So I have a couple tools in there. Not much. Those are all cleaned off roughly. There's nothing else in here, just some chunks of clay. While I'm finishing everything else up, I'm going to let this settle. And all the solids are very heavy and they will go to the bottom, right? And then I will siphon off the top, pour that in the sink, and then the solids I'm going to throw in the trash. Okay? So that's super important because we don't want that stuff in our recycle. There won't be a ton in here. It's mostly just like a slurry. Does that make sense? So that's it. All right. Thank you all.